Hi, and welcome to Progressive Short Takes once again. What will Democrats offer to Georgians during the runoff elections on January 5th for the Senate? That's a big question that journalists have begun to address. A big and very interesting question. So, let's share a couple of articles on it and comment on those articles. First, there's an article that appeared in the Week that was written by Ryan Cooper. What will Democrats offer Georgians? Is the title. This was published on November 7th. The control of the U.S. Senate over the next 2 years will hinge on two runoff races in Georgia scheduled for January 5th. Democrats Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock will face off against incumbent Republicans David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler. Democrats will need to win both to have 50 votes in the Senate, making Vice President Kamala Harris the tie-breaking vote. Just a small correction. The Alaska Senate race has not yet been decided. There's some 44% of the vote that is still out. And even though he's way behind, Senate candidate Al Gross, who's an independent, says that he is still going to win. We have no idea whether he's correct or not because none of the mail-in votes in Alaska have yet been counted. And we don't know how they're going to lay out compared to the in-person votes there, which are the ones that have been counted. Anyway, if Gross wins, then only one victory is necessary in Georgia rather than two. Anyway, going on, given the bewildering results of this election, one can't say with much confidence what kind of strategy might work best. There's a decent case to make it a referendum on Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's obstructionism, coupled to a concrete promise to Georgians that voting Democratic is the only way their state and the country as a whole will be fixed. This winter is likely to be extremely bleak, which may lead Georgians to think that only a unified government will save them. I think that's a good line of reasoning. I think you can create a campaign out of that. And I think that running against Mitch is a very good idea because they can't run against Trump anymore since presumably Trump's going to be gone, as David Dayen points out at the American Prospect. There's no clean narrative that either leftists, moderates, or conservatives can point to claim success for their particular politics in 2020. Turnout was huge, probably the highest percentage in 120 years. Yet, contrary to many leftist assumptions, it didn't lead to a Democratic landslide. Donald Trump got the second highest number of votes of any candidate ever. Both he and Joe Biden finally topped Obama's 2008 record and obliterated his previous vote totals in nearly every state. That said, moderate House candidates lost badly in several districts, while lefties, like Katie Porter, did well in a swing House district. George Floyd protests clearly caused an enormous surge in Democratic voter registration. Biden did horribly among Hispanics in Florida and Texas, though better in Arizona and California, and I think in New Mexico also, by the way. And in many states, including Georgia and Maine, but down ballot, Democratic candidates ran behind, suggesting a substantial population of anti-Trump conservatives who voted Republican down ballot, or the kind of maddening people who vote for the opposite party as a check on the president, perhaps so they can then complain about gridlock afterwards. Others have argued convincingly that the lack of in-person canvassing and outreach to particular groups made a difference in some states. Anyway, the postmortems are still being sorted out. Still, we can say with reasonable confidence that Republicans will leverage the above sentiment and run their campaigns on preserving divided government as a check on Biden's power, in addition to all the usual conservative prop. But let's consider what is likely to happen over the next 2 months. But the coronavirus pandemic is raging out of control in almost every state, Georgia included. Thursday saw over 116,000 new confirmed infections. Hospitalizations are skyrocketing, and deaths, as always a lagging indicator, have been rising for weeks. The hospitals in some locations are already stuffed to capacity. Meanwhile, the economic recovery has been gradually stalling out. Each monthly jobs report since June has seen a decline in the number of new jobs. We're not even close to replacing all the jobs that were lost in the depths of the first wave in March and April. Georgia is doing relatively better than many states, though its unemployment rate actually increased between August and September, the most recent month for which data is available. And with the pandemic going gangbusters, it's likely that some cities or states may conclude they have no option but to introduce more lockdown measures, which will slow the recovery further. At an absolute bare minimum, the United States is crying out for another major rescue package to tide us all over until either President Biden can introduce the rational pandemic control system, or more realistically, we have a vaccine that is developed and deployed. That means another round of $1,200 checks, a re-up of super unemployment, more grants for small business, and so on. But Senate Leader McConnell is already signaling he's only open to a small rescue package, if anything. Well, it seems unlikely that Trump will bother signing anything at all. Senator McConnell is also saying out loud that just like he did under Obama, he's going to obstruct the ordinary business of government, at every turn. Yes, I see this. I want to note here, though, that while it seems unlikely that Trump will bother signing anything at all, if Senator McConnell and Speaker Pelosi can come together, and agree on something, it would be possible that Trump would not have to sign anything because majorities in both houses of Congress could be big enough that they would be veto-proof. So that's a point to keep in mind. I don't think it's a strong argument actually against having the Democrats win in the runoffs in Georgia, because if they do win, it would ensure that a rescue package would be able to be passed. It would not at all depend on Mitch McConnell, and he would not have to be bargained with in terms of the size of that particular package. He wouldn't be bringing his $600 billion to the table, or even his $1 trillion to the table. He wouldn't be bringing anything to the table. He won't even have to be at the table, because he wouldn't be a force to be reckoned with, provided, of course, Joe Biden was to get rid of the filibuster. He said he was against the filibuster. So if they do get control of the Senate, it would be possible for the Democrats not to re-up the filibuster in 2021 when they take over. I therefore suggest, that Democrats develop their own rescue package, which every upcoming member of Congress and both of the Georgia Democratic challengers will promise publicly to pass on day one of the next Congress. Such a concrete offer might just drive enough liberal turnout to match what appears to be an extremely narrow Biden win at the presidential level in Georgia. Vote Democrat and get 1,200 simoleons directly into the pockets of each and every Georgia voter, plus other nice goodies. It's just crazy enough to work. I think it is. I think it's a good plan. I think you want to offer people something concrete that they would get if they vote for you. And the Republicans are not able to counter, because Mitch McConnell isn't going to free up by Kelly Loeffler and by Purdue to counter with a similar offer. Okay, and even if they do, they're in no position to keep their commitments on that score. Not if they get elected. Okay, and Mitch McConnell is the majority leader of the Senate. Oh, once again. So I want to move to a second article now on written by Dave Dayen a couple of days after that, which talk about the same race. That is entitled Hope Lives in Georgia. And it's a very interesting discussion that I want to offer some comments on. Barring a couple of miracles and uncalled races in Alaska and North Carolina, yes, I forgot to mention North Carolina earlier. That's not fully decided yet either. Though there, it looks like Tom Tillis is going to be reelected. There's a lot of votes Cal Cunningham would have to make up, and not that many votes outstanding. I don't think he really has much chance to make that up. Australia is different because we don't know how the mail-in votes are going to structure themselves yet, and 44% of the vote is still out. If they go overwhelmingly for the Democrat, Al Gross can win. That's fact. But I think it's too big a tree for Cal Cunningham to climb in North Carolina. So anyway, comes down to two runoff elections in Georgia on January 5th, 2 days after the 117th Congress initially convenes. One runoff completes the special election for the seat of retired Republican Senator Johnny Isakson, with appointed incumbent Kelly Loeffler, facing the Reverend Raphael Warnock. The other runoff between incumbent David Perdue and Jon Ossoff is happening because neither candidate reached 50% in the first balloting, and under Georgia law, the top two face off from there. My head tells me not to be optimistic about these two races. Why? Because in the three Georgia runoffs since 1992, the 1992 Senate race, the 2008 Senate race, the 2018 Secretary of State's race, all years in which Democrats were gaining nationally, the Republican won the runoff, and the Democrat finished the runoff with a lower share of the vote than in the general. These races featured significant drop-offs in turnout. 1918 Secretary of State candidates received 3.88 million votes in the November general election, but only 1.47 in the runoff on January 5th. Georgia runoffs are turnout battles, and historically turnout favors the Republicans. This is a different Georgia, though. It's a Georgia Joe Biden appears to have won amid historic turnout, particularly among young voters and voters of color. This subset, sometimes called the rising American electorate, is precisely the kind of voter that drops off outside of presidential elections. Without a big target like Donald Trump to vanquish, there are reasonable fears that it will be harder to get these voters in the polls, giving Loeffler and Perdue the advantage, but that cuts both ways. Just as Trump isn't on the ballot to charge up Democrats, he likewise isn't there to bring in the MAGA voters who really only got activated in politics because of Trump. As much as Loeffler, the richest member of Congress, wore the mask of a right-wing populist in her race this year, but to the right of Attila the Hun, to be precise. And as much as Perdue got up to speed on racism, neither is Donald Trump. He inspired lots of infrequent voters who were disconnected from politics and who didn't particularly like Republicans. Their general dejection at the end of the Trump era could translate into depressed turnout in January. It's true Trump could still campaign as the president for Loeffler and Perdue, but he'll be in the home stretch of his term of office at that time. I don't expect Trump, who's done nothing for anyone but Trump in his entire life, to lend a helping hand to the GOP on this one. Maybe some goodwill to the party would set up a 2024 run for Trump, but that's 4 years away, and Trump isn't known as a long-term thinker. the law of headlining a rally is pretty strong, but I suspect he'll be far more interested in destroying evidence and figuring out how to pardon himself for the next couple of months. But Georgia Democrats are energized about winning the presidential vote for the first time since 1992. They do have an interesting combination of candidates to appeal to the voters they need to turn out, specifically Warnock, and Ossoff. But Warnock has the post once held by Martin Luther King. He's also been involved in many of the same circles that organized the victory for Biden prior to running. He was board chair of the New Georgia Project, a critical voter registration organization, for 3 years. For his part, Ossoff already had the eyes, of liberal America on him. 2017, he ran in a special House election to replace then Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price, and raked in tens of millions of dollars in donations, nearly flipping the seat. That race also went to a runoff. He ran a better campaign this year than he did in that race, which focused on the federal deficit. But the more important factor here is geographic. The congressional district Ossoff contested includes a chunk of Cobb County, one of the Atlanta suburbs that are critical for any Democrat wanting to win statewide, and one that helped push Biden over the top in his apparent win. In this sense, Ossoff and Warnock complement each other in what is effectively one race. Dave says he'd be surprised if there's much difference between Warnock's total vote and Ossoff's in January. So the Republicans certainly have an argument to make to their base in Georgia, and they're already making it. The runoffs, they claim, are the only thing standing between the nation and total dominance by radical liberals in Washington. While this isn't actually necessarily true because of Joe Manchin on the Democratic side, John Hickenlooper, and Kirsten Sinema, all people who are going to block things that are too socialist in the Democratic caucus. So it seems like the Democrats could hardly be expected to muscle through mounds of socialist legislation. However, this could still prove effective messaging for the Republicans. However, Democrats can have their own message. They could get all 48 of its Senate members to sign off on a specific coronavirus relief bill that they vowed to put up for a vote if Warnock and Ossoff should win, and give them control of the Senate. This kind of bill, which involves spending, could be accomplished through budget reconciliation, and would only need 50 votes. So this would be a tangible piece of policy with elements like $1,200 checks to most Americans, extended unemployment benefits, and state and local fiscal aid to save the jobs of firefighters, teachers, and cops, on which voters would get to make an up or down decision. This could also unify the center and left factions of the party, currently squabbling over what exactly would ruin the prospects of the Georgia victory. Senator McConnell has talked about doing a stimulus package in the lame duck session, which would short-circuit this idea, but his plans thus far haven't included $1,200 checks or state and local aid. On Friday, after new employment numbers came out, he said that a smaller, more targeted bill would be more appropriate, so expansive relief for struggling families would be on the table, even if Congress passed something in the McConnell vein at the end of the year. Now, I have to add here that what Mitch has lately been doing is to support Trump in Trump's quest for contesting every vote, going to court with all kinds of stuff. So Mitch has been meeting with Barr, and they've been talking about supporting Trump, by this endeavor, and encouraging him not to get out of the race. It's speculated that one reason why McConnell is doing this is to keep the base in Georgia excited about something, perhaps even as late as January 5th, so that they may want to go to the polls then, because maybe they will still believe then that Donald Trump has some chance to somehow be elected, and they would want to go on the 5th to support him with a Republican Senate. or something like that. Anyway, there's some speculation that might be a motive for Mitch continuing to press in favor of Trump when he apparently has nothing to gain, okay, by doing this. Or maybe what he has to gain is getting the Georgia base fairly excited, more excited than they otherwise be by the Republican Senate candidates before the vote on the 5th. Uh, anyway, the combination of a ticket that could get out low propensity Democratic voters, the absence of Trump as a turnout magnet, and the possibility of making the race of making the race a referendum on economic salvation for millions could even the scales of the normally skewed runoffs in the Peach State. The candidates should have no problem fundraising, with Democrats fired up to take the Senate, and the momentum in Georgia is on the side of those who just broke through at the presidential level. I agree with all that. None of this makes the runoff a slam dunk for Democrats. If I had to set a betting line, I'd make them the underdogs in a high-pressure environment with the whole nation descending on the state. Still, Warnock and Ossoff aren't big underdogs with some smart strategy like hiring Chuck Rocha to make sure Latinos turn out again and capitalizing on the long-term multiracial organizing efforts that have transformed the state. They could deliver the Senate to the Democrats. I agree with that analysis entirely. I only wanted to add the part about what Mitch was doing now to try to excite that particular base. We'll talk about that some more tonight when I do my in-depth show. But anyway, that's all that I wanted to do for this progressive short take, which again was not so short. I'm sorry, there's been a lot of news this week, and everything seems to devolve into a long take. So I beg your indulgence on this. It's not as long a take as my in-depth programs anyway. So have fun with this one. I hope you like it. I'm ending it now. And you'll have another one in short order.